I want to talk more about cowboy forecasting here because in a world obsessed with now AI driven scenario analysis, I think it's actually more important than ever to be able to take all this data, especially like if you're a marketplace that's doing like thousands of transactions a day and just like get it down to what actually matters so you can talk about it. Like, do you think that simplicity is even more important than it used to be?
Yeah, well, like you said, you have to understand the model. And a lot of times people build these black boxes, and that gets even worse when you have, some AI coming through and spitting out numbers that you really don't understand where they're coming from there. And so if you don't really understand the drivers of that model and the sensitivity of that model, not only is it not going to be helpful, it's going to be a trap, that you're going to set for yourself. And so if you are able to use like going back to the reverb side, like we started with this dead simple model. Over time, like you do outgrow that. The reason we have this dead simple model is so you could use it, but also the reality that it's going to be wrong. You know,
Yes. Every model is wrong. It's just how wrong.
you're making guesses, and the earlier you are as a company, the more that those are just pure guesses. And that's why I said it's more of like a goal setting tool than it's an accurate like cash flow projection tool or so. As you grow as a company, you have more data through that. Like we got to a stage at Reverb, and then once it was acquired by Etsy, Etsy's a publicly traded company. So, and by this time I was the CFO at Reverb. You have to develop a set of projections that are dead accurate and able to be given to the street. And so, in which case, the level of rigor and analysis going into that is very different than Series A kind of scrappy startup trying to just really focus on building the business. So by that time, we were using pretty sophisticated, analytics to determine every customer, their behavior, their acquisition costs spread across the various channels in our marketing mix, being able to project out like what's our kind of not just the kind of return on marketing investment, knowing what is it going to cost us to acquire a customer and the kind of next incremental transaction, but the marginal return on that. Because the more dollars you spend in marketing, the less, the worse the return gets. And at a certain point, it gets, less than one. And the trick is spending every single dollar humanly possible up until you're at that 1-to-1 or slightly higher kind of return ratio, and then stopping. Because if you're spending less than that, you're leaving money on the table and growth, and you're hindering growth. If you're spending more than that, you're burning cash from that. And so to get to that stage requires a huge data set and enough kind of analytical rigor and power to be able to really have some accuracy in that. But if we tried doing that at year one of Reverb, it would be a completely wasted effort because you manufacture all this kind of false rigor into things. And you say, well, because I have all these data points and because everything else, I feel really confident about my forecast. But all those inputs in there they're either made up or statistically just not significant, and so it's a trap.
I've done that before. I built a model that would do everything but cook you breakfast in the morning. And it's like, but if you toggle the take rate by 2%, the entire thing blows off.
Yeah, no, totally. Increase your payment processing rate by 2 basis points, and it changes everything. And it's like, okay, good to know that that's a really sensitive input into this model. But if I have, if I'm trying to say what I'm going to do a year from now in any level of confidence, like the confidence level is 0% through there. So don't waste time on it. Waste time on like negotiating a better rate on your payment processing or your merchant processing rate, or improving, your conversion rate on your marketing spend.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, lol. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.